Faith Jordan stood at the defense table, hands folded, and spoke 6 quiet words.
Your Honor, I brought the footage.
Officer Wade Hollister laughed out loud. He turned to Judge Sinclair.
Your Honor, sit this black woman back down before she embarrasses herself again.
He stepped closer and slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the courtroom.
Know your place, girl. Trash like you doesn't speak in my courtroom.
A white man in row 3 smirked. 2 teenagers raised their phones, grinning. Someone whispered,
About time.
The bailiffs froze. Nobody stood up. Nobody said a word for the black widow standing there with a red handprint on her cheek. But none of them imagined what the next 11 seconds would cost. Have you ever been humiliated in a room full of people who already believed every lie told about you? 6 months earlier, the morning air over East Atlanta held the cold breath of October. Faith Jordan laced her running shoes on the porch at 5 in the morning. She was 38, 5'6", built like a woman who had carried heavy things for a long time without complaining. A framed photograph sat on the hallway table behind her, a soldier in desert fatigues. Her husband, Jamal Jordan, killed by a roadside bomb outside Kandahar 9 years ago. His folded flag rested beside the photograph. She touched the glass every morning before she ran. Her daughter, Riley, 12 years old, slept down the hall with one arm thrown over a stuffed rabbit. Faith kissed her forehead and whispered the same sentence she had whispered every day since Jamal died. Mama's coming back. She drove to the old converted laundromat on Flat Shoals Avenue. The sign above the door read, Second Chance Dojo. Inside, the mats smelled of sweat and lemon cleaner. Faith ran this place on the thin edge of nothing. Rent was 3 months behind. The city inspector kept finding new reasons to visit. The kids who trained here could not pay. They came because they had nowhere else to go. Faith had earned her black belt in Krav Maga at Fort Bragg, served 6 years as a United States Army military police sergeant, and could disarm a grown man with 2 fingers and a wrist pivot. She did not talk about any of that. What she talked about was breath. She taught her students the 4-count breath Jamal had taught her. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. She told them the first weapon was never the fist. It was the breath. A heavy-set teenager named Devin Wallace tested her one Tuesday. He was 17, 200 pounds, hungry to prove something. He lunged at her during warm-up. Faith caught his wrist between her thumb and finger, rotated her hip a 1/4 inch, and lowered him to the mat without raising her voice. De-escalate first, she said. Defend only when there is no other door. Devin stood up, eyes wide, and never tested her again. Within a month, he was bringing his little sister to class. That same week, a cruiser rolled slowly down Flat Shoals. Officer Wade Hollister was 46, 15 years on the Atlanta Police Department, decorated 3 times, quietly known around the precinct as the Collector for the citation numbers he racked up against minority drivers. His father had been a sheriff in rural Georgia for 30 years. His father had a phrase he liked to repeat at dinner. Never let them forget who's in charge. Wade had grown up on that sentence, the way other boys grew up on grace before meals. He pulled Faith over on a Thursday afternoon for allegedly running a stop sign at Moreland and Glenwood. The ticket was $480. Faith had made the stop. She counted 3 full seconds. She always counted. But Hollister wrote the citation anyway. He leaned against her window. Next time, sweetheart, try obeying the law. He walked back to his cruiser, whistling. Faith sat behind the wheel for a full minute before she trusted herself to drive. That night, she filed to contest the citation. Her friend, Sergeant Dana Brooks, a white veteran she had served with overseas, pulled the dashcam footage from a traffic camera at the corner. The footage showed Faith's sedan coming to a complete stop for 3.8 seconds. Clean as a prayer. On the eve of the hearing, Faith sat on Riley's bed and braided her daughter's hair. Riley asked if she was scared. Faith said no. Baby, tomorrow Mama's going to court. No matter what happens in that room, I stayed calm. I want you to remember that word. Riley nodded slowly. Is calm a kind of strong, Mama? Faith smiled for the first time that day. It's the only kind that lasts. Outside, a police cruiser rolled past the house for the third time that night. Faith pretended not to see it. The morning of the hearing, Faith wore a navy dress and flat black shoes. She carried a manila folder with the dashcam footage, a printed transcript, and 3 photographs of the intersection. She arrived 40 minutes early. She sat on a wooden bench on the 3rd floor of the Fulton County Municipal Courthouse and watched families drift past. Most of them looked like her. Most of them looked tired. Hollister arrived 15 minutes before the hearing. He saw Faith and walked straight toward her. He did not slow down. His shoulder slammed into hers as he passed. The manila folder flew out of her hands. Papers scattered across the marble floor. The flash drive skittered under the bench. Faith did not speak. She did not rise. She lowered herself to one knee and began collecting her papers in silence, the way her mother had taught her to pick up broken glass without cutting herself. Hollister stopped. He turned back. He placed the polished toe of his black service boot directly on the photograph of the intersection. He pressed down until the corner of the photograph wrinkled. He spoke loud enough for the 3 strangers in the hallway to hear. Oops. Probably doesn't matter anyway. Judges around here don't look too hard at evidence from folks like you. A young black father waiting with his son lowered his eyes. A courthouse janitor glanced up, then kept mopping. Nobody said anything. Faith continued picking up her papers. She did not look at Hollister's face. She looked at his boot. She memorized the scuff marks on the toe. She would remember them later. A courtroom clerk named Coretta Banks, 68 years old, had been watching from the doorway of courtroom 3B. She had worked in this building for 31 years. She had seen Wade Hollister bully 3 different women in this same hallway. Her eyes narrowed. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pressed a small button on her phone. She did not know yet what she was recording. She only knew she was tired of watching. Faith straightened up, held the wrinkled photograph in her hand, and counted a slow 4-count breath. "Court is now in session," a voice called from inside. Faith walked toward the door. Hollister followed her, 3 steps behind, already smiling. Nobody in that hallway knew that the quiet woman in the navy dress could end a man in under 12 seconds. Not yet. Courtroom 3B was half full. Judge Margaret Sinclair presided from the bench, 54 years old, gray bob, reading glasses low on her nose. Faith's attorney was a pro bono civil rights lawyer named Evelyn Whitmore, tall and unhurried, who had once argued a police misconduct case all the way to the 11th Circuit. She had taken the case for $1 and a handshake. She did not smile when she worked. Hollister took the stand first. He raised his right hand. He swore to tell the truth. Then he began to lie. Inside his head, the story ran clean. "I've done this dance 1,000 times, Hollister thought. Evidence never beats a badge in this county. Dad was right. You say it loud, you say it early, you never flinch. Juries want to believe the uniform. Judges want to go home." He testified that Faith had blown through the stop sign at approximately 22 miles per hour. He testified that she had been combative at the window. He testified that she had smelled of alcohol. 3 lies in under 90 seconds. When Whitmore rose to cross-examine, Hollister smirked like she was a child who had wandered into traffic. Whitmore played the traffic camera footage on the courtroom monitor. The video showed Faith's sedan coming to a complete, unambiguous stop. The timer ticked 3.8 seconds. No lurching, no rolling, no 22 miles per hour. Hollister interrupted before Whitmore could ask her first question. "Your Honor, this is exactly what I was talking about. These people bring doctored video and play victim. I have been on this job 15 years. I know what I saw. Judge Sinclair tapped her gavel. Officer, you will speak when spoken to. Whitmore continued. She pulled up Hollister's personnel record, heavily redacted but still damaging. 41 civilian complaints in 12 years, 4 allegations of excessive force, 2 settled quietly out of court. Whitmore asked a simple question. Officer Hollister, is there a pattern here? Hollister leaned into the microphone. You people stick together, don't you? The courtroom went silent. Judge Sinclair removed her glasses slowly. Officer, that is your second warning. There will not be a third. Hollister's partner in the second row, a younger officer named Brent Caldwell, stared at the floor. Outside the courtroom, Coretta Banks was still recording from her post near the door. When Whitmore asked about the body camera footage, Hollister said the camera had malfunctioned. When Whitmore asked who had signed off on the malfunction report, he said he did not remember. When she asked if he would submit his cruiser's hard drive for forensic review, he said he would consult the union. Whitmore sat down. She did not need more. The damage was already done. During a brief pause, Hollister stepped down from the stand. He walked directly past Faith's table. He leaned down. His mouth moved close to her ear. He whispered a single word, a slur, the oldest and ugliest one in the American language. Faith's right hand trembled once under the table, just once. She placed her left hand over her right hand and pressed down until the tremble stopped. Her eyes did not move from the legal pad in front of her. She did not breathe out for a full 6 seconds. Coretta Banks saw the whisper from the doorway. She could not hear it, but she saw the flinch. She pressed record a second time on a different app. Hollister reached his chair and crossed his arms. One more shove, he thought. One more push, and she'll crack. They always crack. Then the judge sees the angry black woman, not the cop. That is how this always ends. He rose one more time without permission. He walked back toward Faith's table. He stopped 2 feet from her shoulder. He said, loud enough for the gallery, "Stand up when I pass you, ma'am. That's how we do it in this courtroom." Faith did not stand. Faith did not look up. Hollister's jaw tightened. His right hand began to rise. The bailiffs were 18 feet away, still seated. Judge Sinclair opened her mouth to call order. She was 3 seconds too late. Judge Sinclair called a 15-minute recess before Hollister's hand could fully rise. She ordered him to her chambers. The door closed. Nobody in the gallery heard what she said, but when he walked out, his ears were red and his hands were clenched. Faith stepped into the women's restroom. She braced both hands on the sink. She looked at her own face in the mirror. She did not cry. She had stopped crying on the day the army chaplain came to her front door with Jamal's folded flag, and she had not started again since. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sergeant Dana Brooks. FOIA hit. 41 complaints. 4 excessive force. 2 sealed settlements. Somebody is burying this man's file on purpose. A second text. Faith. Whatever happens, don't give him what he wants. He wants you angry. Angry is how they end careers like yours. Faith washed her hands. She dried them on a paper towel. She folded the paper towel in half, then in half again, then in half a third time, the way Jamal had folded his socks. It brought her breath back. When she stepped back into the hallway, Coretta Banks was waiting. The old clerk pressed a folded piece of paper into Faith's palm and kept walking. Faith opened it around the corner. The note had 4 sentences in careful cursive. He did the same to my nephew in 2019. My nephew is in a wheelchair now. I have been waiting 11 years for someone to stand up to Wade Hollister. I will testify. Find me after. Faith folded the note and put it in her jacket pocket. Evelyn Whitmore found her at the drinking fountain. You doing okay? I'm doing quiet, Faith said. Whitmore nodded. Quiet is our best move. I am going to subpoena the body cam server logs as soon as we're back in session. He said malfunction. The logs will say something else. Across the hallway, Hollister was talking in a low voice to his partner, Brent Caldwell. His voice carried just enough. She needs a reminder of her place. Watch. Faith turned back to the fountain. She drank slowly. She counted to 4, then to 4 again. She was ready. Court reconvened at 10:46. Evelyn Whitmore called Coretta Banks to the witness stand. Hollister's face shifted when he heard the name. He had seen her in the hallway outside courtroom 3B for years and never once looked at her long enough to learn her name. Now she was walking toward the stand in a pale lavender cardigan, and she was going to remember every one of his. Coretta testified in a voice that did not shake. She had dates. She had names. She had her nephew's medical records. She had watched Wade Hollister humiliate Faith Jordan in the hallway an hour ago, and she had recorded the end of it. The video played on the courtroom monitor, the boot on the photograph, the sentence about folks like you, the press of the heel. Hollister's knuckles went white on the defense table. His jaw ticked once every 3 seconds. Faith watched him in her peripheral vision and recognized the signs. Jamal had taught her to read body language in a combat zone. A man about to lose control moves his jaw before he moves his hands. Whitmore rested. Judge Sinclair asked Faith if she wished to make a final statement. Faith rose. Her hands stayed folded. Your Honor, I pulled over within 4 seconds of the officer's lights. I kept my hands on the wheel the entire stop. I was polite. I have the dash cam. I have the traffic camera. I have Ms. Banks. I am asking this court for one thing: the truth. Nothing more. She sat down. Hollister stood up. He did not ask permission. He stepped away from the defense table, crossed the carpeted well of the courtroom in 3 long strides, and stopped directly in front of Faith. The nearest bailiff, a man named Thomas Hendricks with 12 years on the job, glanced at Judge Sinclair for a cue. The second bailiff, a rookie named Carl Morrison, stationed at the back doors, was shifting his weight onto his back heel. Neither of them expected what was about to happen. Hollister raised his open right hand. He slapped Faith Jordan across the left side of her face. The sound cracked like a rifle shot. Papers fluttered. The gallery inhaled as one body. A woman in row 4 covered her mouth. Riley Jordan, who had been brought by Sergeant Brooks to watch her mother work, did not make a sound. Her small hand closed into a fist on her knee. The 11 seconds began. Second one. Faith's head turned with the slap. She absorbed the blow the way a tree absorbs wind. Her eyes closed for exactly 1 blink. Hendricks's hand finally touched his radio. Morrison's foot finally pushed off the back wall. Second 2. Faith's eyes opened. She rose slowly from her chair. Her palms stayed open at her sides. Hollister, misreading her calm as surrender, cocked his right hand back for a second blow. This time, a closed fist. Second 3. Hendricks shouted, "Officer, stand down!" and began to move. He was 18 feet away. Morrison had cleared the back wall that was boxed in behind spectators who had half risen from the gallery benches. Second 4. Hollister's fist traveled forward. Faith slipped 2 inches to the left. The fist passed through empty air where her temple used to be. Her right hand rose, captured his wrist at the radio bone, and locked it. Her left hand braced his elbow. Second 5. Hendricks was still 12 feet away, drawing his radio to his mouth, not his weapon. Morrison had cleared the aisle but was now boxed behind the prosecution table. Second 6. Faith pivoted her hips a quarter turn, the same pivot she had drilled 10,000 times at Second Chance Dojo. Hollister's forward momentum became a weapon against him. His 6'2" frame folded across her fulcrum like a hinge. Second 7. Her right elbow, controlled and measured, met the point of his chin at the exact angle to shut down the brainstem's equilibrium. No rage, no extra force, only physics, practiced until it became breath. Second 8. Hendricks was now 8 feet away, mouth open, mid-shout. Morrison had finally cleared the table corner and was sprinting. Second 9. Faith performed a supporting leg sweep, her right foot hooked behind Hollister's planted knee. She did not drop him. She lowered him. Second 10. Hollister was unconscious before his shoulder touched the carpet. Faith's hand, still gripping his wrist, cradled the back of his skull through the final 4 inches of the fall so his head did not strike the wooden floor. A small mercy. The courtroom cameras caught it. It would matter later. Second 11. Faith stepped back. Both hands rose, palms open, fingers spread, elbows away from her ribs, the universal posture of surrender. She spoke loud enough for the court reporter to transcribe. "I am not a threat, Your Honor. I request protective custody pending your review." Bailiff Hendricks arrived 2 feet from Faith, one hand on his radio, the other hovering over his sidearm. His eyes moved from Hollister's unconscious form to Faith's raised palms, to Judge Sinclair's stunned face, and back to Faith. In that 3-second triangle, his training caught up to his body. A woman had been assaulted twice by an armed officer inside a courtroom, and she had ended the threat before the men paid to protect her could cross 18 feet of carpet. Morrison arrived behind him, radio at his mouth. "Medical to courtroom 3B, officer down." Hendricks raised a hand to cut him off. "He is not down. He was dropped. There is a difference." Judge Sinclair slammed the gavel once. "Order! Order!" Bailiff Hendricks, secure Officer Hollister, paramedics. Ms. Jordan, sit down, hands visible, do not move. Court stands in recess pending emergency review. Faith sat, palms up on the table. In row 4, a data analyst named Gregory Sullivan had been filming the entire hearing on a phone wedged against his coffee cup. He stopped recording at second 12. His hands were shaking. He watched the clip back once. 5 seconds in, he already knew what he was holding. Within 90 minutes, the video was on 3 platforms. By sunset, it had 2,400,000 views. By midnight, it had 14 million. The hashtag #StandWithFaith entered the trending column, first organically, then accelerated by a Marine Corps veteran in San Diego who reposted the clip with a single caption. "This is the textbook." She did not exceed. She did not retaliate. She contained. Watch second 10. She catches his head on the way down. That is who you want teaching your daughters. The slow-motion replay of second 10, of a black widow's hand cradling the skull of the man who had just struck her, became the single most shared image of the week. Strangers set it as phone wallpapers. A mural appeared on a wall in Oakland within 48 hours. The counter-narrative arrived within the same hour. A police union spokesman appeared on local news, already on message. A trained combat veteran ambushed a decorated officer mid-proceeding. The footage is being manipulated. We will pursue the full weight of the law. 2 stories. Same 11 seconds. One country splitting in real time over which version to believe. In a small conference room behind courtroom 3B, Evelyn Whitmore set her briefcase down and exhaled. "They're going to come for you now," she said. "The slap was their mistake. What you did after is the story they will try to bury you with." Faith touched her cheek. The handprint was still warm. She thought of Riley in the second row. She thought of Jamal's folded flag on the mantel. She said nothing. A knock at the door. A pale-faced aide opened it. "Miss Whitmore, the district attorney's office just filed. Aggravated assault on a peace officer. They are asking for remand. No bail." Whitmore closed her eyes. The trap had been set before the slap ever landed. The police union moved fast. By 6 in the evening, the local fraternal order had called a press conference on the precinct steps. The union president stood in front of a row of officers in dress uniform, Wade Hollister front and center with a small white bandage on his chin. The president read from a prepared statement. Officer Hollister is a decorated 15-year veteran. Today, he was the victim of a premeditated ambush by a trained combat veteran inside a courtroom. The so-called footage has been selectively edited. We expect the district attorney to pursue maximum charges. We stand with Wade. The charge was aggravated assault on a peace officer. Maximum penalty, 20 years. The prosecutor, a career climber named Vincent Caldwell, was the cousin of Hollister's partner Brent. Nobody mentioned that out loud. The story changed faster than the truth could travel. A doctored clip began circulating on a right-wing blog, cropping out the slap entirely and showing only Faith's pivot and elbow. The caption read, "Ex-soldier attacks veteran officer for writing her a traffic ticket." Within 6 hours, the clip had 3 million views. Pundits argued that Faith's military background proved premeditation. A retired detective on a cable news panel said the words, "domestic terrorism," without anyone stopping him. On Monday morning, Faith's landlord at Second Chance Dojo posted an eviction notice. He cited a morality clause. The dojo had 30 days to vacate. Devin Wallace, the heavy-set teenager Faith had gently lowered to the mat, stood in front of the notice and read it 3 times. He was 17. He had never cried in front of another person. He cried in front of his classmates that morning and did not try to hide it. Riley came home on Tuesday with a split lip. A boy at school had called her mother a murderer. His friend had shoved her into a locker. Riley told her mother the story at the kitchen table without tears. "I kept my hands down, Mama. I stayed calm." Then she went to her room and closed the door. Faith sat alone at the kitchen table that night. In front of her on the placemat was Jamal's folded flag. She had carried it down from the mantel for the first time in 9 years. She put one hand on the flag and cried into her other hand for 22 minutes. She did not make a sound. Riley stood in the hallway in her pajamas, watching her mother's back shake, and understood for the first time that calm is not the absence of pain. Calm is the choice to carry pain without spilling it. Riley walked quietly to the table, climbed into her mother's lap, and whispered 4 words into her shoulder. "Daddy would be proud." Faith nodded once. She wiped her face. She did not explain. Narrator reflection. I chose to tell this part of Faith's story because the world never talks about the night between the victory and the verdict. That kitchen table, that folded flag, that 12-year-old girl climbing into her mother's lap. That is where real courage lives. Not in the 11 seconds everybody watches. In the 22 minutes nobody films. On Wednesday, Sergeant Dana Brooks launched a legal defense fund. The goal was $100,000. The fund hit that number in 14 hours. By Friday, it had crossed $800,000. Donations came from all 50 states and 19 countries. A retired Air Force colonel donated $5,000 with a note. I served with Faith's husband. Jamal would want me to stand up. Evelyn Whitmore filed an emergency motion to compel disclosure of Hollister's body camera server logs. The district attorney's office stalled. The union lawyers filed counter motions. The hearing was moved from municipal to federal court because the civil rights implications had grown too large for a local judge to contain. Meanwhile, in a gray break room at the Fraternal Order office, Wade Hollister sat on a vinyl couch with a cold pack against his jaw. His father had driven up from the country to see him. The old sheriff sat across from him and did not speak for a long time. Finally, the father said, "You laid hands on her first, son." She was disrespectful. "You laid hands on her first in a courtroom, in front of a judge, in front of a camera." Hollister's jaw tightened. "Dad, we can fix this. Brent's cousin has the case. Union's backing me. Once the jury sees she's a trained killer, it's over." The old man stared at his son for a long time. "I raised you better than that," he said. He stood up. He put his hat on. He walked out of the break room and did not come back. He did not yet know that Coretta Banks had been keeping a private log for 11 years. He did not yet know that there was a second body camera, worn by a rookie officer riding along with him the afternoon he pulled Faith over. and that rookie had not been told to delete the footage.
He did not yet know that Diane Caldwell, his former partner from 4 years ago who had resigned and retrained as a civilian crisis counselor, had spent those 4 years quietly documenting the pattern of misconduct she had witnessed during their 2 years riding together. She had kept her notes in a black 3-ring binder in her mother's basement in Marietta. The binder had 128 pages. Diane Caldwell watched the courtroom video on Wednesday evening with her mother. She watched it 3 times. On the 3rd viewing, she said out loud, to nobody in particular, "It is time." She drove to Evelyn Whitmore's office on Thursday morning at 9 sharp. She carried the black binder under her arm. Rewatch moment. The week between the slap and the federal hearing, #StandWithFaith crossed 40 million uses across platforms. Faith did not do interviews. She kept taking Riley to school. She kept training the kids at Second Chance Dojo even after the eviction notice. She did not say a single public word. Her silence became its own kind of answer. On Friday night, Vincent Caldwell held a strategy session with 3 senior prosecutors and 2 union attorneys. We crack her on the stand. We ask about combat. We ask about killing. We make her say out loud that she has taken human life. Juries cannot unhear that. Nobody in that room knew about the binder. The federal hearing was set for the following Tuesday. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta was a different building than the municipal court. Higher ceilings, colder marble. Judge Harold Whitaker presided, 61 years old, a former Marine lieutenant colonel who had served 2 tours in Iraq before going to law school. He did not tolerate theater in his courtroom. The union's lawyers did not yet understand that. The gallery was full. Riley sat in the 3rd row between Sergeant Dana Brooks and Coretta Banks, holding each of their hands. Faith wore the same navy dress. Evelyn Whitmore wore black. Vincent Caldwell gave his opening statement first. He walked the jury through Faith's military record in careful, clinical language. MP Sergeant, 6 years active duty, 2 deployments, hand-to-hand combat certifications, Krav Maga black belt. He used the word weapon 4 times in 6 minutes, always attached to Faith's body. Her hands are weapons. Her elbows are weapons. Her training is a weapon. He did not mention the slap once. Evelyn Whitmore's opening was 31 words long. Ladies and gentlemen, a United States Army veteran was struck in the face by an armed police officer inside a courtroom. She defended herself. That is the entire case. Thank you. She sat down. Caldwell called Faith to the stand on the 2nd day. She walked to the stand with her hands at her sides. She swore to tell the truth. She sat down. She did not touch the microphone. Caldwell opened with theater. Ms. Jordan, you're trained to kill, correct? Faith met his eyes. I am trained to come home. A juror in the back row wrote that sentence on her notepad. Ms. Jordan, during your time as a military police sergeant, did you take human life? I served in combat. I defended my unit. I do not discuss specific engagements in public. That is a rule I was taught by my husband and by the United States Army. Answer the question. I answered it. Your Honor. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. She answered it, Counselor. Move on. Caldwell shifted. Miss Jordan, you could have absorbed the slap. You are trained to absorb strikes. Isn't that correct? Yes. You could have stepped back. You could have let the bailiffs handle it. I could have. But you chose to strike. He slapped me once. His fist was cocked for a 2nd strike. I chose to live. Caldwell paused. He had rehearsed the next question for 3 nights. Ms. Jordan, tell the jury, when you ended Officer Hollister, did it feel good? The courtroom went silent. Faith did not flinch. She waited 4 full seconds, the length of one of her own counts, and answered. No, sir.
It felt like every other time in my life I have had to hurt someone. It felt like work I wish I had never learned how to do. 3 jurors lowered their eyes. Caldwell had no follow-up. He sat down. Evelyn Whitmore called Coretta Banks. Coretta read from her personal log. 11 years of entries, dates, names, incidents she had witnessed from the doorway of courtroom 3B. She did not raise her voice. She read for 34 minutes. By the end, 3 jurors were openly crying. Then Whitmore stood up and spoke the sentence that broke the case. Your Honor, the defense calls Diane Caldwell. Vincent Caldwell's head snapped up. He had not been told. Nobody on the prosecution side had been told. Diane Caldwell was Brent Caldwell's younger sister. She had been Wade Hollister's riding partner 4 years ago. She had resigned from the Atlanta Police Department quietly and had been written off internally as a woman who could not handle the job. Diane walked to the stand in a gray blazer with her mother in the gallery. She was 31 years old. She carried the black 3-ring binder. She placed it on the rail of the witness stand. Ms. Caldwell, Whitmore began, can you identify the document in front of you? Yes. It is my personal log from my 2 years riding as Wade Hollister's partner. It documents 78 separate incidents in which I witnessed him use excessive force, racial slurs, falsified reports, or intimidation against civilians in the Atlanta metropolitan area. The gallery gasped. Judge Whitaker tapped his gavel once for order. Ms. Caldwell, why are you coming forward now? Diane looked directly at the jury. Because I watched a woman I have never met defend herself against my former partner on a video that went around the world. And I realized I have been a coward for 4 years. I should have testified the day I resigned. I did not. I am doing it now. Whitmore walked her through the binder page by page. Incidents, dates, names, photographs, audio files recovered from Diane's personal phone. Page 63 contained a photograph of the inside of Wade Hollister's precinct locker. Taped to the inside of the door was a handwritten list. Names of civilians he had cited or arrested, ranked by categories he had given them, with slurs next to each name and a tally of points he had awarded himself. The list had 291 names on it. Faith Jordan's name was the most recent addition. It had been written in fresh ink the afternoon after he had pulled her over. The gallery made a sound that was closer to a groan than a gasp. Riley Jordan squeezed Coretta Banks's hand hard enough to leave a mark. Rewatch moment. The photograph of Hollister's locker door became the second most shared image of the case. News networks blurred the slurs and showed the list. Civil rights organizations in 11 states filed amicus briefs within 72 hours. Inside Wade Hollister's head, the certainty collapsed. She did not plan this. She did not ambush me. She just stayed standing. And the universe she was standing on had been watching me the entire time. His hand began to shake under the defense table. Nobody saw it. He saw it. Evelyn Whitmore's closing argument was 8 minutes long. The final 90 seconds carried the case. The law protects the power of a still hand. Faith Jordan's hand was still for 38 years. It was still during her husband's funeral. It was still when a stranger put his boot on her evidence. It was still when he whispered a slur in her ear in open court. Her hand moved exactly once, in exactly the way the law permits. And when it moved, it cradled the head of the man who had struck her, so that he would not be hurt on the way down. That is not violence. That is not vengeance. That is mercy with a black belt. And if this jury returns any verdict other than not guilty, we do not have a justice system. We have a calendar of grudges. Thank you. She sat down. She did not look at the jury. She looked at Faith. Faith nodded once. The jury went out at 3:14 in the afternoon. They came back at 6:52 the same evening.
3 hours and 38 minutes. Judge Whitaker asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood up. She was an accountant from Decatur. She had not smiled once in 9 days of trial. She smiled now. Your Honor, on the charge of aggravated assault on a peace officer, we, the jury, find the defendant, Faith Jordan, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Riley Jordan stood on her seat. Coretta Banks wept into her hands. Sergeant Brooks saluted from the gallery. Evelyn Whitmore finally, for the first time in her career, allowed herself to smile in a courtroom. Faith did not move. She closed her eyes. She counted a slow 4-count breath. Then she turned to the jury box and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. The moment the verdict was read, a courtroom sketch artist named Helen Brantley captured Faith's face in pencil. The sketch was of a woman with closed eyes and a small, private smile. That sketch won a Pulitzer Prize the following spring. Wade Hollister did not make a sound. He was already a dead man walking in the uniform he no longer deserved. Judge Whitaker thanked the jury and released them. Before he dismissed the court, he made one final statement from the bench. He removed his reading glasses. Before this court adjourns, I am referring the conduct of Officer Wade Hollister and any members of the Atlanta Police Department who facilitated the concealment of his record to the United States Department of Justice for federal civil rights investigation. I am also ordering the immediate unsealing of all settlements connected to this officer. The public has a right to know what has been paid for in their name. He brought the gavel down. Court adjourned. Wade Hollister was arrested on the courthouse steps 11 days later. The federal charges were deprivation of civil rights under color of law, falsification of federal records, and obstruction of justice. Bail was denied. His pension was suspended. The Atlanta Police Department announced an immediate internal review of every arrest and every citation Hollister had signed in the previous 15 years. 318 cases were reopened. 84 convictions were vacated. 14 people walked out of prison within 90 days, including Coretta Banks's nephew, who was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Athens, Georgia, and began walking with a cane again within a year. Wade Hollister accepted a plea deal 8 months later. He received 10 to 12 years in federal custody. His father did not visit him in prison. His father died of a stroke 6 months into his sentence. The funeral was small. Wade was not permitted to attend. Vincent Caldwell was removed from his prosecutor position after the family connection became public. Brent Caldwell resigned from the Atlanta Police Department within a week. The city of Atlanta, under heavy public pressure, established an independent community oversight board with subpoena power over the police department. The first chair of the board was Coretta Banks. She held the post for 3 years before retiring to Florida, where she took up painting and sold her first canvas for $480, which was exactly the amount of the traffic citation that had started everything. Second Chance Dojo was saved. A coalition of Atlanta businesses purchased the building outright and deeded it to Faith's Foundation. The dojo expanded to 3 additional locations within a year. Within 2 years, there were 22 Second Chance dojos operating in 12 states, each teaching Faith's 4-count breath, each opening every class with the sentence, de-escalate first. Defend only when there is no other door. The Jamal Jordan Community Safety Act passed the Georgia State Legislature 14 months after the verdict. The law required body cameras to be worn and functional for every arrest and every traffic stop, with an independent server chain of custody outside the police department. It required the public release of all misconduct settlements. It required that any officer with 4 or more complaints be placed on mandatory retraining. The bill passed the state Senate 34-20. Faith was invited to the signing ceremony. She brought Riley. She did not make a speech. When the governor handed her the pen, she said 4 words. "This is Jamal's pen." She slid it into her jacket pocket and walked off the stage. 6 weeks after the verdict, the Army sent a letter. Jamal's old unit had voted unanimously to send Faith a new flag. The flag was hand-embroidered by a veterans collective in San Antonio. Sewn into the hem, in white thread on white fabric, was a single sentence. She stayed calm. Faith unfolded the flag at her kitchen table with Riley beside her. Riley read the sentence out loud. Then she read it again. Faith placed the new flag beside Jamal's old one on the mantel. The two flags stood side by side. Riley touched each one in order before school the next morning. It became her new ritual. Narrator reflection. The world did not change because Faith Jordan hit him. The world changed because she refused to hit him until there was no other door. And when the door closed, she did what the law permitted, and not 1 ounce more. That distinction is the whole story. #StandWithFaith became, over the following 12 months, the organizing tag for a national self-defense literacy program operating in 86 American cities. Grants funded free Krav Maga and de-escalation courses for women and teenagers in every major metropolitan area. The first graduating class of Faith's National Instructor Program, 92 women, stood together on a stage in Washington, D.C. in matching black t-shirts that read, "Calm is a kind of strong." 10 months after the verdict, Faith Jordan taught her first national workshop in a converted warehouse in Cleveland, Ohio. 260 women sat on folding chairs in a circle around her. Faith wore black leggings, a black t-shirt, and the same flat black shoes she had worn to the courtroom. She did not bring notes. "The first weapon is not the fist," she said. "The first weapon is the breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. You will practice this every morning for the rest of your life, on a bus, in a meeting, in line at the grocery store. You will build this habit until it is louder than fear. That is how you win fights you never have to start." A woman in the back raised her hand. She was 23 years old. "Coach, what do you do when the fight finds you, anyway?" Faith looked at her for a long moment. "You cradle their head on the way down," she said, "because the law is watching, and because you are not them." The room was quiet for a beat. Then it erupted in applause that did not stop for 3 minutes. After the workshop, Faith sat on the edge of the stage and read letters. She read them out loud for a series her foundation had started on YouTube called Letters to the Dojo. A single camera, a wooden stool, Faith reading letters from strangers. A letter from a mother in Missouri whose 16-year-old daughter had escaped a sexual assault in a parking garage using Faith's elbow technique. The daughter had written a second note at the bottom. "Thank you for teaching my mom to teach me." A letter from an Iraq War veteran in Texas who had been carrying a handgun for 3 years because he was afraid of his own anger. He wrote that he had watched Faith's courtroom video 41 times. After the 40th viewing, he had unloaded the handgun, locked it in a safe, and driven to a veterans counseling center for the first time. Calm is a weapon, too. I did not know that until I watched you. A letter from a 12-year-old girl in Maine who had been bullied at school. I learned to breathe. I stopped being scared. The bully got tired. Thank you for teaching me the breath. Faith read each letter once. She did not cry. She folded each letter in half, then in half again, then in half a third time, the way Jamal had folded his socks. She placed each folded letter in a wooden box her daughter Riley had made her for Christmas. Somewhere in a federal prison in central Georgia, Wade Hollister ate dinner alone. The television on the wall played a cable news segment about a new Second Chance dojo opening in Cincinnati. Faith Jordan appeared on screen for 3 seconds, handing a certificate to a 14-year-old girl with a shaved head and a serious face. Hollister watched for the 3 seconds. Then he put his fork down and stared at the tray until the segment ended. He did not eat again until breakfast. On a quiet Thursday evening, 1 full year after the verdict, Faith closed up Second Chance Dojo on Flat Shoals Avenue. She turned out the lights, one switch at a time. She stepped out onto the sidewalk. The October air was cold again, the way it had been the morning everything started. She locked the door. She touched the sign that read Second Chance Dojo. She walked to her car. Riley was in the passenger seat with her homework open on her lap. She looked up as her mother got in. "Good day, Mama?"
Quiet day, baby. Riley smiled. Is quiet a kind of good? Faith put the key in the ignition. It's the only kind that lasts. She pulled away from the curb. If this story moved you, here is what I want you to do before you close this video. Scroll down to the comments. Type the name of a strong and quiet person in your life. Your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, your daughter, your best friend. Somebody whose calm is the thing that holds your world together. Type their name. We're going to read as many of them as we can, together, in a tribute video next month. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that calm is not weakness. Send it to someone who has been underestimated their whole life. Send it to someone who has been taught to apologize for existing. And if you have not already, subscribe. Next week, we are going to tell another story that somebody tried to bury. Another story about somebody the world decided to dismiss, and somebody who, when the moment came, refused to sit back down. Hit the bell. Turn on notifications. Stay close. Because the world has a lot more Faith Jordans in it than you think. And the only thing missing is for us to start telling their stories out loud.
You know, what still gets me about Faith's story is not the 11 seconds, it's not the verdict, it's the part where she caught his head on the way down. Think about that for a second, because here's what I keep coming back to. We live in a world that teaches white people to apologize for taking up space, that teaches women, especially black women, to make themselves smaller in rooms where somebody with a bag decided to shrink them. And Faith didn't do that. She didn't shrink, she didn't explode either, she just stayed. And when she finally moved, she moved exactly one. That is not weakness read up as restraint. That is the highest form of strength this country almost never talks about. I'm telling you this because somebody watching right now is tired. Somebody has been underestimated for years. Somebody has a father in their lap and nobody in the room believes what is inside of it. I need you to hear me. Your calm is not nothing. Your patience is not a flaw. The receipt you have been keeping quietly, the breath you have been practicing, the line you haven't crossed yet, that is the whole case. Hold it. The room will catch up. Do me one favor before you scroll away. Drop the name of a strong and quiet person in your life down in the comments. Your mama, your grandma, your best friend, somebody whose calm is the reason your word still works. We are reading those names out loud next month. Subscribe, turn on the bell and stay close, because there is always another Faith and the world deserves to know her name.